Every time an AI chatbot refuses to describe something violent or sexual or disturbing, that refusal had to be taught. Taught by a human. Reading real, disturbing examples, one after another, all day, so the machine could learn what not to say. In 2023, an investigation found some of those humans were being paid as little as $1.32 an hour. Some developed PTSD doing it. Here's the actual mechanism behind that refusal message you've probably seen from a chatbot. Training an AI to recognize and refuse harmful content requires feeding it real examples of that content, labeled by a human, so the model can learn the pattern. Somebody has to be the one reading it first. In January 2023, Time journalist Billy Perigo published an investigation revealing that OpenAI had contracted this exact workout to Sama, a San Francisco-based outsourcing firm with offices in Kenya. Beginning in November 2021, OpenAI sent tens of thousands of text snippets to Sama's Nairobi office, much of it pulled from what Perigo described as the darkest recesses of the internet, describing child sexual abuse, bestiality, murder, suicide, torture, and self-harm in graphic detail. Workers read and labeled this material so OpenAI's models could learn to detect and refuse it. Here's where the specifics matter and where accounts genuinely diverge. Time's investigation, based on reviewing internal payslips and interviews with 4 Sama employees, found workers took home between $1.32 and $2 per hour, depending on seniority and performance. One worker described the experience of reading a particularly graphic description as torture, telling Time, "By the time it gets to Friday, you are disturbed from thinking through that picture." Sama disputed the framing of those numbers directly. In a statement to the Register, a company spokesperson said Sama actually paid between $209 and $322 per month, calling that more than double Kenya's minimum wage and above the local living wage, and arguing that comparing it directly to U.S. dollar per hour wages was, in their words, a false equivalence. OpenAI, for its part, told Time it had worked with Sama and said there had been a miscommunication about the specific types of graphic images the project was meant to include. Both things can be true at once. The wage may have been reasonable by local standards, and the psychological toll on workers reading that specific content, day after day, was still real and documented. And this wasn't an isolated incident specific to one company. By July 2023, a group of Kenyan workers filed a formal petition calling for an investigation, describing exposure to content depicting bestiality, necrophilia, incestuous sexual violence, and the abuse of minors, without what they described as adequate psychological support. Workers reported developing PTSD, paranoia, depression, anxiety, insomnia, and other lasting symptoms. According to reporting from Time and other outlets, Sama shut down its content moderation division entirely in early 2023, ending roughly 200 jobs tied to this kind of work, and separately faced a lawsuit in Kenyan courts brought by a former content moderator over working conditions tied to content moderation for Meta. This isn't unique to Kenya, either. The exact same pattern played out, years earlier, much closer to Silicon Valley itself. Facebook, now Meta, employed thousands of content moderators in the U.S. through an outsourcing firm called Cognizant at offices in Phoenix and Tampa. Reporting by Casey Newton at The Verge in 2019 found these moderators reviewing roughly 10 million potentially rule-breaking posts a week, some of them earning around $28,800 a year, were regularly exposed to graphic violence, hate speech, and abuse content, with limited mental health support. In 2018, a moderator named Selena filed a class action lawsuit, alleging she developed PTSD after 9 months on the job, with symptoms triggered by something as small as touching a computer mouse or entering a cold building. In May 2020, Facebook agreed to a $52 million settlement, covering more than 11,000 current and former moderators across 4 states, funding ongoing mental health counseling, and new tools letting moderators view graphic content muted and in black and white rather than full color with sound. Cognizant exited the content moderation business entirely following the reporting. So why does this keep happening at multiple companies on multiple continents for over a decade? Because this labor is structurally invisible by design. It's almost always outsourced to a third-party contractor rather than employed directly, which creates legal and financial distance between the tech company benefiting from the work and the people actually doing it. It's frequently located in countries with lower wages and less protective labor laws, which lowers costs further. And the actual output, an AI that confidently refuses harmful requests, or a social media feed that looks mostly clean, is specifically designed to look automatic, seamless, entirely machine-driven, with no visible trace of the thousands of human hours spent training it to look that way. Every time an AI system draws a clean, confident line around what it won't discuss, that boundary was drawn first by a person, reading the worst version of that content so the rest of us never have to. The technology gets called artificial intelligence. A meaningful share of what makes it safe to use was, and still is, genuinely human labor, largely uncredited, and until fairly recently, almost entirely undiscussed. If this changes how you think about the phrase AI safety, that's exactly the right reaction to have. Subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden labor behind the technology we use every day. And tell me in the comments, had you heard about this part of how AI gets trained before this